important. So, of course, all learning acquired in any context, in any form, in any modality of learning is valuable. And validation, recognition of knowledge, skills, competences from non-formal and informal learning, from work experience, also from life experience, is fundamental for lifelong learning policies, for social and economic inclusion, and for personal development. And currently, nowadays, we all know there are new digital tools appearing, being used, that offer new potentialities to renew, to modernize, let's say, and to enhance also the use, the take-up of recognition of prior learning and its efficiency. Today, we have 3 country cases. So the first one is Zambia. So Zambia is going to report, to tell us, to share with us the experience, and will tell us about the RPL system, the policy framework, methods, practical application as well. And it's an interesting case. So Zambia RPL system is already at the stage of implementation. Then we have a second case, Cameroon, and this presentation will be in French. Cameroon, the system VAE, RPL system, the experience of developing the system. And I think this is also a very interesting case, because it is a situation, a system, an RPL system that is now being developed with the various aspects, policy, tools, and methodologies and capacities. Then we have the case 3, France. The VAE system, so the RPL system, so the approach, mechanisms, experience. And France is, of course, a case of a very long-standing experience of RPL, VAE, better said. And there is a process and efforts to renew, to modernize. And our speaker is going to tell us about these efforts to renew the system. Please, if you could mute microphones if you are not speaking, thank you. Then at the last session, we will have then our discussants, and today our discussant comes from Kenya. Stanley Maindi is very deeply, concretely involved in implementation of the RPL system in Kenya. Then we have, of course, questions and answers session and a poll. So with a number of questions together. Could you mute Anna or Alina? Thank you so much. Then we have the poll with a number of questions. It is always very useful to also to gather your views. I always have to very briefly just remind us all the context of this webinar. So this webinar is part of the capacity development program of the project Developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework. So the ACQF project is ongoing. It's going to be completed close to the end of this year. It is a component of the Skills for Youth Employability Program, Skills Initiative for Africa, technical cooperation, and it is being implemented in a partnership, African Union, European Union, GIZ, and European Training Foundation. The main objective is to lay the foundations for the African Continental Qualifications Framework as a sustainable policy instrument, a reference qualifications framework for lifelong learning, connecting regional and national qualifications frameworks, supporting comparability, transparency of qualifications of all levels and subsectors, and contributing to relevant policies for continental integration. The project uses a participative approach. Let us also remind the ACQF is viewed, is seen, envisaged as a very large, the largest of all the regional qualifications frameworks. It is 55 countries, 8 regional economic communities. It's a policy initiative of the African Union. It is strongly backed, based on EU policies, such as Continental Education Strategy, EU Free Movement Protocol, and African Continental Free Trade Area. And it is being developed as a qualifications framework for mutual trust, cooperation, support to countries and regions. Also, very briefly, these are the most fundamental outputs of this development project. So the ACQF policy document and action plan, backed by foundations, technical guidelines, training modules, analysis, capacity development, networking, outreach to people, the website, and also a governance model that is being developed and strengthened throughout this period. That includes, for example, the advisory group, and many of you are members of this advisory group. Let me also remind that the components of the capacity development program are varied. The intention is to have a combination of modalities of learning that can meet needs of different groups and reach out to different objectives as well. So this peer learning activity is one of these 15 peer learning webinars. And many of you have been in the webinars in 2020 and 2021. And you know more or less the kind of knowledge sharing that is taking place. And this is knowledge sharing, and this is also knowledge creation, very, very fundamental. Very briefly also, the capacity development program now in 2022 is composed of these main elements. So first of all, this series of peer learning webinars on recognition of prior learning, or VAE, RVCC, in February, March. Then an ACQF in-depth training program. There will be 2 such programs of 5 days each, one in April, online, another one in July, hopefully hybrid. Then ACQF conferences, learning management system, e-learning platform is being now constructed, and more work on thematic briefs that can be of interest. I will not go into details of this view of this slide. I just wanted to say that all this knowledge that has been accumulated and shared through these 2 years of joint work, through these various peer learning webinars, all these materials, presentations, video recordings, short reports are all available at the ACQF website. You can simply look up acqf.africa. You can visit, use, contribute, and you can then have access to all these materials. Under the capacity development program, there are the peer learning webinars, and there are also video learning materials structured in a manner that is user-friendly. I think it is a very useful resource for all countries that are interested in developing, consolidating their national qualifications frameworks and the various policies, pillars that concern the national qualifications frameworks as a system, from a systemic, let's say, point of view. Yeah, we had already said that our previous webinar that took place on 18th February, and it was the very first of this series dedicated to RPL, that we are looking at RPL, VAE, RVCC as validation of learning gives us wings to go over barriers and to reach objectives that can be reached through all the learning that we acquire in different modalities. And so learning is everywhere. It is in classrooms, it is digital, it is in groups, it is in workshops, it is through processes of validation. It is also in our ongoing and normal, let's say, professional activities. So many goals can be covered through these many different varieties, modalities of learning. Let us very briefly also recall the topics that were addressed by our speakers at the previous webinar that took place on 18th February. So first we had the presentation of the draft text of ACQF guideline on validation of learning. And the focus of that presentation was on RPL. Then we had a presentation done by CEDEFOP, by the representative of CEDEFOP, Ernesto, who shared with us information, views on validation of non-formal and informal learning in Europe, past, present, and future. It's also a long-standing experience with already many lessons, research, and also new steps, new perspectives in development. And then we had a country case. So the first two cases were more of a regional, continental scope. And we had our first country case of this series. It was Cabo Verde, Republic of Cabo Verde, the RVCC system. So the policy and legal framework was presented in detail, the methods used, links to the national qualifications framework, and practical implementation of the RVCC system in several sectors. We had very good discussion, many questions, and the presentation was done by the representative of the coordination unit of the national qualifications system, Mr. Amilcar Mendes. Let me also very, very briefly just recall some of the results of the poll that we did at the end of this first peer learning webinar. And here you can see some of the results. So there was a question asking about the status of RPL in your own country. And as we can see, the majority of our participants replied that it is in development. And then the second group, let's say 32%, said it's in advanced implementation and has large experience. Also, another question was about the qualifications that can be obtained through RPL or VAE processes. And here we can see that there is an equal standing between countries, participants replying that all qualifications of the NQF can be obtained through RPL processes. And another group says only technical vocational education and training qualifications can be obtained via RPL processes. Others, for example, mention that only partial qualifications, but there is an equality of positions between all and only TVET. So the situation is diverse across countries. There was some, I will not, of course, go through all questions. I just selected some of those responses that can also be very useful for today's discussion. And there was a question about the main barriers and challenges for enhanced or wider implementation of RPL in your country. And as you can see, there was a very strong kind of quite clear predominance of responses saying that the main barrier is lack of trained RPL professionals. You can see here the green, lack of trained RPL professionals. There are also many responses about different constraints with financial resources or lack of RPL centers, providers, lack of guidance and information for the public, and others. But lack of trained RPL professions appears used as quite an important barrier or challenge. And finally, from the results from the poll, there was another interesting question. It was an open question, and it was quite good to see very many contributions, many submissions, responses through this open question. And this is just a summary of your responses. The question was, how should ACQF help in the future improvement and expansion, let's say, of RPL VAE on the African continent? As you can see, there are many submissions about more discussion, more campaigns, more sharing of good practice. Another point made was deeper understanding of the links between RPL and higher education. Another also suggestion was sharing of good practice about private sector involvement in RPL processes. Then also training of RPL practitioners, as it is one of the important barriers mentioned also. Another point made very well articulated was about RPL and as equitable, comparable approach or channel for acquisition of qualifications as formal learning. And it must be equitable and comparable in order to have value for the people. Another point made was about the importance to support countries developing, implementing RPL policies and mechanisms. Digitalization was also referenced, was also mentioned by participants. So digitalization of certificates, supplements, and also an idea came forward about establishment, development, support of a network of RPL via RVCC on the continent. And now, before passing the floor to our speakers today, just very briefly, our colleague Brigitte Bouquet from France Compétences, and Brigitte Bouquet is a very assiduous participant of ACQF peer learning activities, peer learning webinars. After the webinar, shared with us this information. There was a lot of discussion during the last webinar about training of RPL practitioners. Some participants asked about qualifications related exactly with RPL skills, competences, qualifications that would certify, that would give visibility to this profile and also professional activity. So Brigitte Bouquet, based on those questions, shared then with us this information. So this is simply a qualification in the repertoire, the national register, let's say, of qualifications in France. You can have access. I have included there the URL, the link, and this is just a screenshot of the information about this qualification. So countries who might be interested in this qualification, and the qualification is RPL advisor for pathways through RPL VAE, and also this new modality, which is Action de Formation en Situation de Travail, AFEST. So this was just to say that there was a follow-up by one of our participants, and this is an idea, just one of the qualifications in the national repertoire, the national register of qualifications of France. There are also other qualifications, but this is an important one. So our speakers today, and then I will immediately pass the floor. So we have Fidelis Chilo from Zambia Qualifications Authority. Fidelis is the manager for standards and quality assurance. He's going then to present, to share with us the case of Zambia RPL as a policy and also as in application. Besides Zambia Qualifications Authority, Fidelis will tell us there is another very important institution that is actually implementing RPL, and it is TVETA. And colleagues from TVETA are also present today in this webinar. Then we have Professor Rodolphine Wamba from Cameroon. Professor Rodolphine Wamba is Deputy Director of Quality Assurance at the Ministry of Higher Education, Cameroon. And she, of course, there is another team of representatives from Cameroon representing various ministries that are closely interested and also involved in development of an RPL policy mechanism and tools for the country. These are the ministries of employment and TVET, as well as Ministry of Secondary Education. But Professor Rodolphine Wamba will do the presentation. And then we have, representing France, Linda Bos. Linda is chargée de mission, and she and her role is follow-up and development of VAE, so RPL system, and this is then an activity under the umbrella of the Ministry of Labor, Employment and Inclusion. So welcome, Linda. Thank you very much for sharing your time and presenting the experience of France. And like this, I immediately pass the floor to Fidelis for his presentation. Fidelis, the floor is yours. You have approximately 25-30 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eduarda. I'll be sharing the screen shortly. It's this one. Yeah.
Fidelis, if you want, we can also share for you, but you are already. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Are you able to see the?
Yes, we can see, indeed.
Thank you. The case of Zambia, the presentation will run as follows. First of all, I will try to give you the country profile to appreciate where we are coming from in terms of our education system. And then from the country profile, we'll move to present a bit of the education system and then the implementation of RPL. Zambia is a land-linked country in the southern part of Africa. Land-linked in the sense that we are sharing borders with countries that we interact so well and are well linked and share a lot of experiences. We do have the Congo to the northeast we have Tanzania, in the east we have Malawi and Mozambique. In the south we do have Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and to the west we have Angola. We were a British colony from the 1890s until the 24th of October 1964, when we gained independence. In between these periods, you will realize that we had some industries coming up, particularly in the mining sector, manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. Around that time, mostly there was apprenticeship. That is what was mostly used in the sense of equipping workers with skills, mostly through job on training. And that's the reason why currently we can claim that some kind of RPL has been in existence in Zambia for the past 50 years. Though, as you may see, the true framework and the documentation may have started a little later in the 80s, but prior to that, some kind of recognition of skill through apprenticeship was taking place. Now, the population is currently estimated at 17.9 million. Of course, we are going to have our census this year, which will give us the true picture, and that's why I'm saying estimated. Now, within this estimate, you can see that we do have 5.6 approximately made up of the youth. And the training facilities are really choked to the core, in the sense that on an annual basis, we do have more than 400,000 pupils leaving secondary school, and yet we may not have the same capacity for training opportunities as per college and university spaces. And a number of these people end in industries and learning while they are working within industry or by observation. Hence, the aspect of RPL is an important aspect in the Zambian case because of these parameters. Coming to the education system, we do have a distinct structure of about three, in the sense that we do have the general education subsector, where we do have the early childhood up to senior secondary school formal learning. And beyond that, we do have the TVET sector, which specifically focuses on skills training, specifically for industry and vocational aspect. This TVET sector is a subsector on its own, with specialized institutions that train people in a variety of skills in there. And then beyond that, we do have the higher education subsector. Around there, we do have the universities, and of course, recently we are seeing also university colleges that are going to come on board and so on. So in essence, we can talk about an education system that has three distinct subsectors with specialized regulatory framework around there, as it can be seen on the screen. The higher education sector is managed by another institution called the Higher Education Authority. This regulates this sector and ensures that the sector is responsive enough in as far as quality training standard is concerned. The TVET sector, which focuses on the trades and occupations issues, also is managed by the Technical Education, Vocational and Entrepreneurship Training Authority, which is in short called TVETA, the colleagues who are on this platform today. And it's this sector that I'm much more interested to share the RPL implementation in our country. This is the body that is charged with the responsibility of ensuring quality and regulation of training and facility availability of reasonable facilities within this sector. Then we do have the general education sector, mostly also quality assured by the Department of Standards under the Ministry of Education. That also ensures that the school system has adequate facilities, adequate teachers, and teaching and learning is happening. They do have standards officers that visit these institutions to ensure quality aspect in that regard. Now, one would ask the question as to what the role of the Zambia qualification framework in all this is about. Our role as the Zambia Qualification Authority is that we are mandated through an act of parliament that we develop and implement a qualification framework for the country. And within that, we are given the mandate also to develop policy and the guidelines on the implementation of the recognition of prior learning. And therefore, our mandate is to anchor and ensure that whatever is happening in this sphere is internationally comparable, and making sure that at all times we are able to update and improve according to the new developments around the matter. May I now get direct to how the implementation of RPL in Zambia has been. In our case, most generally, the implementation of RPL has been a preserve of the TVET sector, focusing mostly on informal and non-formal learning candidates. But of course, we have had a situation where the certificated learning was being considered. That's why when you look at our guidelines, we may talk about RPL being implemented in a formal, informal, and non-formal learning setup. Now, the formal learning setup has been happening in the sense that prior certificated learning would be considered and used by the candidate to be given or to be granted some form of exemption for further studies, or in an element where probably he may just need some kind of bridging course and enable him to go further, which currently must be seen as credit transfer. That is the way it has been around that. Now, in this TVET arrangement, the implementing organization has been our colleagues, the Technical Education, Vocational and Entrepreneurship Training Authority. As I said earlier, this is the institution which is mandated to regulate training in the TVET sector in Zambia. It accredits and registers training institutions and quality assure everything that happens in these institutions. So they are the main regulatory body around there. And of course, their output feeds into ZAQA work. ZAQA coordinates the work that happens in this sub-framework. Now, what has been the procedure in RPL in the TVET sector in our country? The procedure has really been similar to the common approach that is happening around, where, first of all, a candidate wishing to present his skills for recognition would approach a particular institution that is registered by TVETA and trains in that particular field of interest. So the candidate will get there, present himself that he would want to demonstrate his skills in that particular field and be assessed so much that at the end of it all, he will be given a recognition certificate of competence in that particular field. That institution will then facilitate his registration by helping him fill in that form. But of course, they will do a preliminary analysis of his claims as to whether he or she is a suitable candidate for this particular assessment. Once the institution is satisfied, the institution will then make a move to inform TVETA that they do have this candidate or this number of candidates that are requiring assessment for purposes of RPL. And then TVETA at that stage will move to arrange for the appointment of an accredited assessor who is going to conduct the assessment on this particular candidate. Around that time, TVETA would have also designed a particular assessment tool that will be used by this assessor as he goes to implement this assessment. In a nutshell, this is how it looks. Generally, there is awareness or sensitization that is being given to the public on the existence or availability of this opportunity in RPL. This sensitization has been happening, and the candidates then will present themselves into stage 2. Stage 3, the institution will enlist this person as a potential candidate. If they are not satisfied that he doesn't meet that benchmark, this candidate can still be given an opportunity where he may need to upskill certain areas and so on for him to be present enough for this particular assessment. Once that application has been accepted at 3, he will move to 4, where the assessment instruments by TVETA will be arranged. The candidate in the meantime is guided how the assessment will be done. He's told the parameters, the duration, and the competence levels that are expected. Then eventually in 6, you'll see the assessment is conducted. In 7, the results are processed. And if he is successful, an award at stage 8 will be given. Now, different approaches that are used in determining and validating this particular competence in this individual is a combination of a number of approaches that are available. First of all, the candidate might be available and be subjected to an interview to determine the experiences that he may have and how long he has practiced around that skill. May also involve evaluation of some tasks, some assignments, and some projects that this person has been able to do or is given an opportunity to demonstrate this particular skill. Or in the case of the formal certificated learning, that is where you have the validation of the previous certificate. Remember, here I use RPL with caution that this is actually credit transfer arrangement, but these are the available perspectives in determining the issues around the competence of the candidate. The candidate might also have a portfolio of evidence. It could be recommendations from previous employers where this person has been working and doing that kind of work, where he acquired the skill. It could be pictorial evidence and so on. All this portfolio will be submitted and verified by the assessment team. So this is how the validation and recognition of RPL, of the learning through RPL in the TVET sector is conducted around there. Now, there is also an element that demands that as we award through RPL, we need to maintain quality. Now, so quality assurance in RPL in Zambia is around the issues of guidelines. So at every moment, it is important that the guidelines are adhered to. And these guidelines, like anywhere, they emphasize on transparency, they emphasize on having the right tools, the space for the candidate to prove his capabilities and so on. So these are some of the issues that are critical. We ensure availability of necessary facilities where this candidate is presenting himself. Does that center got the right equipment, the right tools that this person will be able to demonstrate a skill fairly without hindrance? Are those the right workshops and so on? So that is a factor that must be established. Also, we have to ensure that this only happens in those institutions that are quality assured, the registered institutions, and an accredited assessor is the person that will be used in each case that is presented. There is also need always to choose the most appropriate and fair methodology to assess a candidate that presents himself in this RPL. And of course, always to be fair, there is need to apply a triangulation of evidence from the multiple sources that have been made available by the candidate who has presented himself, in order for us to ensure that the candidate has been fairly assessed. Once this candidate has satisfied every parameter, then TVETA will award a qualification that is recognizable at the appropriate level of the qualification framework. Notably, I wish to mention here that most of the RPL cases that we have had are in the range of the trade testing framework, trade testing certificate around there. We have not had a scenario where we have done RPL in higher qualifications like diplomas. I think that is an area that we may explore once we learn a lot from others on how they've been able to apply RPL in higher levels qualification. Now, the major users of the TVET RPL in Zambia is industry. By industry, we mean most employers. These employers may have, in one way, recruited employees, and these employees have learned by doing, and yet they have not had any formal recognition certificate around the skill that they now possess. And therefore, different employers request TVETA to assess the candidates that they have and award a qualification of that value of the skill that they may possess. And of course, individuals, whoever feels that they have acquired a skill in whichever form, formal or non-formal or informal, they may present themselves. For instance, if somebody has learned basket making or brickwork, bricklaying, through his uncle who is a certified builder and has been helping out and learned how to do this over the years, he may present himself to be trade tested in bricklaying. And if he manages to certify the level of competence around that, then he may be considered to be given a recognition certificate at the lowest of level, trade testing level in that particular field. Talking about the main users and the major sectors that we have seen around our country, we do have a number of skills in the mining sector that have been presented for RPL. The agricultural sector has been one area. Of course, tourism recently has also emerged. I wish to mention tourism as well. Then, of course, currently, TVETA has been implementing a water and sanitation sector project, of course, funded through GIZ, where we have seen a number of people presented for RPL in a variety of skills in that particular sector. Now, a snap statistics of these sectors and how much has been done in this particular area. We may talk about the mining sector between 2017 and 2021, with more than 1,000 candidates presented and successfully assessed through RPL and awarded some recognized qualification through TVETA. Tourism sector also between 2019 and 2021, more than 300 candidates were successfully assessed in the wildlife safari, walking, canoeing, and guiding, and drives. That sector previously has had people learn on the job, but in these game reserve areas, and they are being trained by the owners of those investments, but they never had any formal certification. Thank you. Then, of course, we do have agricultural sector. More than 900 candidates there have been assessed and certified again. A number within there have had that opportunity. The GIZ project through TVETA, we've seen as of 2020, if I'm not mistaken, of course, my colleagues from TVETA can confirm or verify that, the 37 water operators, 42 plumbers and sheet metal fabricators, and 19 pit empters were presented in 2020 for RPL and were successfully awarded in that area to ensure that this particular sector had skilled manpower with recognizable certificates. Other areas that have been there are those that you can see there: carpentry and joinery, design, cutting and tailoring, dewatering and filtration operations, fishing, duct truck operators, mechanical fitting, poultry production. It's quite a huge spectrum of skills in the mining sector, in agriculture, in manufacturing. All these particular areas have had a number of skills being assessed through RPL, and people getting the formal certificate through TVETA. The other perspective has been also the entrepreneurial youth around the market areas, conducting metal fabrication, conducting different projects of carpentry and joinery. All those have been sensitized and invited to present themselves before TVETA to be assessed through RPL, so that they do have a formal kind of certification. And around there, may I say thank you so much. That is, in a nutshell, what TVETA has been able to do around the implementation of RPL in Zambia.
Thank you very much, Fidelis, for your presentation, for all the details you shared from the policy framework, the steps, let's say, the process, and also the achievements. It was, I think, very, very pragmatic and clear. Thank you very much, Fidelis. Colleagues, I wanted to just remind that you can write your questions or comments in the chat box, so that we address them during the question and answers session. Thank you. And now I don't see for now any question in the chat box or any comment. And you have time, of course, to reflect and write. I don't know if anybody else from the Zambia team would like to add a word. If not, we could then gradually move to the second session. And so we now go to Cameroon, a different region in Africa, Central Africa. If you don't mind, Fidelis, you could stop sharing. And so our colleagues from Cameroon will be able to share their presentation. You have seen, dear participants, that we shared, many thanks, Fidelis. So we shared on the chat box the link to the policy and policy document of ZAQUA on recognition of prior learning, if you are interested in this content. And now the floor will be to our to Cameroon. So Professor Rodolphine Wamba, Professor, would you like me to share, or est-ce que vous voulez, professeur, que je fasse le partage, ou bien vous-même?
Do you want me to share, or do you want to do it by yourself? You can share for us, Eduarda. Thank you.
So I'd like just participants to please use now the interpretation possibility. You have interpretation, the interpretation button is available. You can see now the presentation will be in French. So, Professeur Rodolphine, merci beaucoup. Nous avons toujours beaucoup.
Professor Rodolphine, thank you. We spoke a lot about the efforts by Cameroon to develop a system that is inclusive. And I believe that's one of the great messages from your experience in developing RPL. So it allows citizens to progress via RPL. So thank you. Just let us know when you want us to go forward with the slides. Thank you, Eduarda, and to all the participants. Thank you for following the presentation by Cameroon. Of course, we are in Central Africa. As Eduarda said, it's been a while. We are doing our best to reach a very inclusive RPL. As it is on the screen, the plan of the presentation is first, the great objectives and the reason for the RPL, then the component and the methodology, the processes of the RPL, and also the implementation of tools, the challenges, the actions already undertaken, then the needs of Cameroon when it comes to ACQF. So we will not say it too much. RPL is very important to allow people, regardless of the age and the level of study, so they could have some form of professional certification. So the need is felt in all the countries, especially in recent years. With the previous presentations, you can see that's the case in a number of countries. And RPL is producing the same results as professional training, whether it is initially or continuous. RPL is for certification as established by the state and registered in the national repertory for professional certification. Now, when it comes to technical components, all activity sectors and all the ministries, of course, they need RPL. Here, we just listed a number of ministries because all the sectors need RPL. You have the Ministry of Professional Training and Labor. We also have the Ministry of Higher Education. We have the Ministry of Secondary Education and the Ministry of Public Works, which is one of the most recommended or the sector with most requests. Now at the Ministry of Labor and Professional Training, which is more advanced than other ministries in this, you'll find job referentials or job benchmarks that will allow the candidate to be recognized for a certain level of qualification. My colleague, and I'm doing the presentation on behalf of all the colleagues. We have Mr. Bonongo from the Ministry of Labor and Mr. Diodon from the Ministry of Secondary Education. they would be able to give us more details on training, so we'll have more clarity. So I was saying in that ministry, we already have benchmarks. So at the Ministry of Secondary Education, we organize a number of seminars for a number of years to sensitize the public. And we also have an ad hoc committee that was set in place in order to start working on the tools that will help us to set RPL rolling. So one of the work is on the translation of the qualifications. So we thought about the second year at university.
So the first results should be communicated at the end of this month. And right now we are working on the translation of diplomas with reference to skills, and then we'll continue. Then we'll do referentials in terms of labor, and we also have referentials in terms of development and revision through many seminars we put in place. We tried to find some certificates with referentials. So we're trying to share our information. Her sound is not the best. It's like we lost her. So at the Ministry of Secondary School Education, we use the standards. So we can say that today at the Ministry of Higher Education, there's an act of orientation dated 2001, and it stipulates in its Article 12 that each cycle leads to the issuance of a national diploma or institution attesting to the knowledge, skills, and or elements of professional qualification acquired. So we can say that there's no experience at the higher education. We haven't experienced the RPL. That is why we thought that it was good to revise this law so that it can articulate clearly the RPL, so that there will be either a certificate or a diploma. So it is an ongoing revision. There's a decree that is establishing and organizing a functioning committee, and this for the implementation of the RPL. So this committee has been existing for some years to try to see what are the tools that are necessary to be rolled out in the RPL. And one of the tools, it's a decree establishing the national RPL system in higher education in Cameroon, because everything that we are doing, we are trying to see what kind of tool that we can use so that we can't continue waiting for the judicial before moving to the academics. So we are putting in place these tools at the higher education, because we are going to look at the Ministry of Labor. Those ones are at an advanced level. As I was saying, at the level of the Ministry of Labor, they have already 3 legal instruments governing RPL. The first instrument, it is the law that was the law of 2018 that is governing vocational training in Cameroon. The second law, it is the law of June 2020 that is setting out the modalities of application of certain provisions of the aforementioned law. And the third one, it is a decision that is dated 2018, if I'm not mistaken, which is setting out the modalities for the organization of RPL sessions. So this decision was taken well before the promulgation of the law. So because there's a higher demand, that higher demand push the MINAFOR, or the Ministry of Labor, and to push them to use the laws. Next. With regards to the process, RPL process. So we start the process as follows: information, counseling, and guidance. So here we actually have a council that meets with candidates, individuals who are doing the follow-up at the level of the Ministry of Labor and after the council's orientation, we go to the request for admissibility, which makes it possible to assess the admissibility of the application on the basis of the criteria previously defined. After the file has been deemed receivable, then there will be a follow-up or accompaniment of a duration of at least 3 months, so there they start now identifying all everything that is in the file. So there will be a jury that will appreciate everything. Then after the jury has examined, then there will be a validation by the jury of the skills of the candidate in a professional situation. Then after that, there will be a post RPL follow-up where the candidate will be evaluated. So this post RPL follow-up will check if there's validation or not, so that they will do necessary readjustments. And of course, the jury, RPL jury, will make a decision to validate or not. If there's a partial validation, then they will ask the candidate to bring more documents. If they do not validate, then the candidate will have to bring back a new file. Currently, when we talk about implementation of the tools, last year or the previous years, the training of RPL advisors were supported by three seminars. There were There were training advisors, guide. They were being trained so that they can accompany the RPL candidate. Once the process has been launched, then they will follow the candidate, and then there will be there was a support charter where they look at the candidate to see what are the requirements of the RPL jewelry. And of course, there will be the development of application tools, RPL application tools. Then because we need necessary tools to validate the RPL. As I was saying, there's an ad hoc committee that is translating diplomas. These are diplomas of lower level. Then we are also developing certification tools where they are preparing the operational directory of trades and jobs, then the preparation of national directory of professional certifications, and then the development of national framework of professional qualifications. So, as I said, the Department of Labor is far advanced because it has all these tools. So we know that the development of a national framework of professional tools is very useful in terms of RPL. So it aims at receiving a candidate, evaluate its level. For it to happen, the country must have a national framework for professional qualifications. Next. With regards to the experimentation, that is the pilot of the implementation of the RPL, as I was saying, this experimentation, it is well advanced because before the promulgation of the 2018 law, several sessions, RPL sessions, were organized on experimental basis. And thanks to these above mentioned decision, then the following professions came out: executive secretary, automotive repairer, and eyewear optician. In this regard, a text of greater scope, which is the decree, is being prepared to be submitted for signature by the relevant authorities. Then we want to talk about the challenges. Although we have all these texts, the extended implementation of RPL to all areas of activity still faces major challenges, including the definition and publication of the national directory, which is our database of professional certifications, the definition and publication of the levels of qualifications relating to the above mentioned qualifications, and consequently the development of the national framework of professional qualifications. Yes. So, talking about actions already taken, these are the actions already taken to face the challenges. Number one, the inventory.
une action que nous avons menée.
Of course, is not exhaustive of the titles and certifications in force in Cameroon. And then we have the definition of the conditions of access and obtaining of the titles and certificates. This is very important for those who aspire to get certificates for the higher education, because we don't have the RPL implementation at that level yet. Talking about the needs in Cameroon, of course, we have a lot of needs, including the implementation of the necessary tools for the effective start or launch of the RPL, especially at the level of higher education. As I said, the Ministry of Labor, they have already the opportunity to implement the RPL. Next, in conclusion, I can say that the RPL system is an approach of equity and social promotion and to promote social justice. So if somebody doesn't have a diploma or a certificate, it will be difficult for them to find a job. We have a lot of compatriots who have been sidelined while they have experience. They have been trained in their professions, and they can validate everything they have acquired or they have learned. So the need of its expansion in all areas, and especially its implementation at the level of higher education, is real in view of the strong demand constantly growing. We can say that at the higher education, we have an equivalence commission, and every time we have some sessions. Every time there's a session, there's a high demand of candidates whose files, these files belong to the people who acquired experience on the job. So far, these files are still pending because the candidates haven't met the necessary requirement for them to pursue the studies. So that's all I had. Thank you so much for your attention. And we are available, my colleagues and I, to answer your questions. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, professeur Rodolphine, pour cet exposé, pour au fait nous montrer le chemin du développement d'une nouvelle politique du domaine de l'apprentissage tout au long de la vie dans un pays. Et donc, on voit...
So thank you so much, madam. And we have seen different tools, different requirements and concerns that you are trying to implement. I want to ask Mr. Matthew from the higher education if he wants to add on. I want to thank Prof. Rodolphine Wamba, because she actually talked about all the areas of RPL in our country in terms of the demand at the level of profession and also higher education. I want to add that beyond the legal instruments and the requirements, in RPL, we can say that the organization of RPL session, it is there. It has to do with referentials of skills. And it is on the basis of that, that those who come from the private sector, those who have salaries or not, when they come, they are facing these skills. And as Prof. Rodolphin said, that there's a jury that examine them. We can say that the minimum period to, if you need to be appreciated, it goes from 3 years when it is a specialized labor, semi-qualified worker, 5 years, and 10 years for technicians, higher technicians for 15 years. So in 2018, when the law was put in force, we started, why? When we put this duration, it's not because we want to close the door of recognition of skills. It is to say that anyone, we're not just going to ask to allow everyone to come to knock at our doors. We want to allow those who acquired skills to come and be evaluated. So when she talked about RPL process, I want to say, just like the Ministry of Higher Education, they give them some booklets. So as she explained, there are some counselors who are helping the candidates who want to come to be evaluated. So this is what I wanted to add on what Prof. Wamba was saying. Thank you, Eduarda. We are there. If some colleagues have some questions, they may ask. Thank you. Thank you, Matthias, for your clarifications and all these information elements.
Thank you so much to Professor Rodolphin Wamba, Matthias Bonongo, for the presentation, for the additional information. And before we move to France, maybe we could address some of the comments we have here already on the chat box. And then just 5 minutes, maybe some of these questions can be immediately clarified. So let me ask, so there is a question by Maria Luisa. Maria Luisa is from Mozambique. So she's asking whether she understands that Zambia and Cameroon do not have yet RPL addressing or available for qualifications of higher education levels. And Mozambique is in the same situation. So the question is, what could be done to address this need, and what can be done to develop validation of non-formal formal learning, or RPL, that would be applicable and applied in higher education? I think this is quite an important question that many people have in their minds. Maybe here we can say that in fact Cameroon is developing already an approach that already addresses higher education, starting with Bac plus 2, so by the lower, let's say, level qualifications of tertiary education, higher education. There is another question, a very interesting one, and maybe we can leave it for the session on questions and answers. It is about the method or the approach used in Cameroon to translate the qualifications or diplomas, so to translate them in learning outcomes. So maybe this is a good question for the questions and answers session. There was also an important question asked to both countries about orientation and information for the wider public. How is this done exactly to attract more people and to enhance the outreach of RPL or VAE? So maybe this will be also an important question for the last session. I'm just trying to say that we are immediately handling all the points made or comments made in the chat box, and we will then address them right after the presentation of France. I don't know if there are any additional comments immediately by the team of Cameroon before we close this session on Cameroon. Yes, please, Matthias. Allez-y.
Je voudrais répondre à la préoccupation.
I want to answer the concern. To translate, we start with referentials of skills. I want to say that when the team of methods, when they built referentials at the Ministry of Labor, what we do, we build one document that we call referential of skills. We do not do it in our office, but in terms of the work analysis, situational analysis on the job. So when the professionals of work, once they are not there, we cannot validate. So that's why we have the notion of the skills. So there we have a description of the kind of job that the candidate is doing. So we will translate that into the skill needs. So what will be the skill or the certification of the person who has been doing that kind of job every day? So after the description in our first part of referentials, the second part deals with skills. Then we define the skill according to the context of the kind of job they were doing, performance criteria. Well, that's what I can tell our colleague who asked the question. Thank you so much, Matthias. So it is the approach by competence. So thank you so much. And now we will go to the other question. So now we have France. Thank you, Linda. If you want to share your presentation, Linda Bos, who is in charge of missions and who is in charge of follow-up of RPL at the Ministry of Labor and Inclusion. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay, I have shared my screen. Have you seen? So I work at the Ministry of Labor, Employment and Inclusion. So we are in charge of design and approach and practice of validation of prior experience in France. So it is a judicial framework, and we also have social partners. So it is also in charge of program evaluation. So I work in the mission of alternatives of qualifications, so that are dealing with the public policies in qualifications. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
J'avais peur parce que tout était figé, alors je me suis dit, je pense que la bande passante est faible. Je poursuis. Ah, d'accord, avec grand plaisir. Ok. La mission donc contribue à l'élaboration des
So
politiques de
our mission contributes to training policies and also apprenticeship in RPL. So we coordinate policies of training on the job. So we are working with social partners.
Donc, je crois que c'est figé. Je ne sais pas si c'est moi seul qui a le problème. La présentation.
Vous m'entendez du coup
Can you hear me?
Je vous entends plus. Je pense que j'ai une perte de connexion.
Non, ça va bien,
Ah.
Linda, on vous
parce que
entend bien.
Je n'ai pas bien entendu le commentaire, du coup, je ne sais pas de quoi il s'agit.
Non,
Excusez-moi.
il n'y a aucun problème. C'était juste au sujet de changement de diapo.
Ah oui,
Maintenant,
très bien.
ça
Oui,
y est,
je vous
c'est fait.
assure le changement de slide, effectivement.
Oui, oui.
Voilà, donc
bien.
ça, c'était la petite présentation de notre administration.
That was our short presentation. So we have a technical framework and judicial
And we'll
framework,
talk
and then
about
we'll go
funding.
to the
I'll give you numbers,
steps
then
of the RPL
experiments
process,
that were
and then I'll
implemented
talk to
for
you about
the whole
the
thing to
financing and then
progress.
some
Now, when it
figures.
comes to the
So
technical
with
framework
regards to
and
the
the legal
technical
framework,
and legal
which is
framework,
present in the labor code, I've given you here the legal references. I've also listed the history because RPL is a process that was set in place over time. It started in 1934. At the time, it was about issuing the title of an engineer that is certified by the state. It was given to people with 5 years of experience. So that was the first RPL cases. In 1984, there was a law to validate the RPL, something you find at the higher education. It's a true acknowledgement of the experiences for those who did not go through the formal learning to be able to go and carry on with the learning. So that's a possibility was given for people not to follow some parts of the university degree, but then to consider prior learning. It's only 10 years later than this RPL was included through the law of social upgrading. So it's considered at the same level as continued training, and it gives the opportunity to have all the certification via RPL and via some activities that are done in the professional setting.
Je vais changer de slide. Alors, en 2004,
in 2004, there was a law that allowed for the transfer of skills to regions. So there were changes in terms of funding and support. In 2009, individual right for training was now enacted. In 2014, the law made easier the RPL mechanism. Among the measures that were set in place, we acted on the length of the experience during the step of receivability that goes from 3 to 1 year. There was also the opportunity to consider the period of initial training in a professional environment.
Donc, il y a eu aussi des changements, excusez-moi,
there were changes on the
qui est devenu un
file of
pour tous les
application file for all the assessors.
Et également, un autre changement,
Another change also was
professionnels qui avaient été obtenus
the professional certificates that were obtained, but that were incomplete or partially validated.
La personne avait 5 ans
So when there were some things missing, they were given 5 years to fulfill and complete the certification.
ouvert. Et en fait,
So that was open. All the blocks of competencies are valid
sont valides dans le temps, en fait. Et non
over time and no more for 5
par
years.
rapport aux partenaires sociaux,
Now, regarding social partners,
la loi stipule que lors de l'entretien
the law
avec le salarié
says that during the interview, the employer has to give information on RPL, and there is also an obligation to discuss RPL during the interviews.
Alors, donc, toute personne qui est engagée dans la vie active
So everyone involved
de son expérience,
can show, of course, their professional experience, depending on the terms of Article L.6.11.1 of the Labor Code. Everyone is able to show their prior learning, and RPL is accessible for professional certification, reference in the national directory, and the minimum duration of the activity for the application to be received is at least a year. So anyone who wants to benefit from the RPL based on the funding that allows the professional learning. So these are the key points on the legal and technical framework. So you had the laws of 2004, 2009, and 2014, 2016. I was on the one for 2018, which is the last law that really made vocational training to improve. It opened the opportunity for RPL actions around a number of competencies and skills. So that was supposed to end on the 31st December of 2021. Now, given the steps of the RPL process, we have different phases. The orientation phase. So the training is done for free. So you have the application file, which is presented to the assessor during the phase of reception. During that phase, the assessor will check on the duration of the experience, and they would measure the gaps between the activities against the benchmark. So over the 2 points, receivability is given or not. Now to go into the assessment step, so they will go before a jury, they have interviews. There might be some support given, but it's not compulsory. It is proposed to those who need it. And also under the collective actions that are put in place. Now, when it comes to the funding of the RPL, you have regional councils that organize and fund information centers. That's under the decentralization law. Can you hear me? Sorry. Yes, we can. Thank you. All right. Now, for those who are seeking for work, we have Pôle emploi that could cover what regional councils do not cover. The businesses and bodies in charge of collection or using the fund from the business contribution. The candidate could also use their own training account.
Alors, je voulais vous donner quelques chiffres. Donc, en 2019, 55 500 personnes ont déposé un dossier de recevabilité et 36 000 se sont
In
présentés.
2019, we had 55,000 people who applied for RPL. And we can see that there is still lots of applications that are failing to reach the requirements. In 2017, we found that RPL is still underused compared to its potential, and the processes that are still incomplete could lead to abandonment. From there, we set in place a number of experiments under Article 9 of 5 September 2018 that was implemented to respond to the specific challenges in RPL for a number of sectors. So this was an opportunity for RPL for a number of skills. There was a framework by the Ministry of Labor that signed a document for a program to implement this mechanism to integrate the two levels. So to propose an analysis of the experience of the candidates via a number of questions and also practical experiments so that they could, of course, validate the skills. So when the candidates do not have the proof of the experience, they could be asked questions and then show it practically. Because, of course, many who are coming from outside, they may not have all the documents to show their experiences. So because of the differences in admin as well, so this is the opportunity for such people to show that they could do the RPL using questions and practical experiments. Now, the second program is a provision that is in place with the possibility to learn a number of skills under the RPL in order for them to have the acknowledgement of their competencies and experiences learned in the past as professionals. And this is to give them a chance to have more employment chances in the future. Now, the third program is on the employers sector for remote work under a great project. Those who decided to set in place professional pathways to make these jobs more attractive. These programs were set in place to respond to the challenges of recognition. They give the possibility to access 4 different ways for validation. In some cases, we're talking about a complete certification. And the program also proposes the recognition of professional know-how, especially for those who are struggling to access to RPL. So these are mechanisms that are from the RPL to allow people to have their professional know-how to be recognized. And also the proposition of a certification to acknowledge basic skills in order for them to access the job market. So reading, writing, and all these basic competencies and skills. Now I'm going to talk about the RIVA experiment that is based on a digital service that is dedicated to RPL. This experiment is based on qualifications from the health and social sector. This experiment has for objective to remove all the obstacles to develop RPL. We've noticed that sometimes receivability was taking too long, and we've given ourselves 8 days to respond and give a decision. Like I said, for support, it's an option except for candidates who are coming from a certain target public. So here the support is systematic and it's linked to the receivability, because the support in the law is given after the application is receivable. Then after we have information and councils that are given by regional councils. Now, under this experiment, we also have the will to reduce the time before the candidates are presented to the jury. So the maximum waiting period is 30 days and 24 hours for the results. We also want to create a unique exchange platform via REVA, which is a digital service that will allow us to do all and everything under one platform. So it will allow other organizations to develop RPL with more visibility of the processes. The last thing in this experimentation is to introduce the recognition, and this is done this is what I wanted to share with you. Here you have the link to the RPL site. Thank you for following. Thank you, Linda, for your presentation and clarification, and also for presenting the new solutions and innovative solutions you are experimenting?
De redonner, disons, à la VAE.
In order to give RPL a more efficacy. Thank you.
To start immediately to address some of the questions. And before that, let me just very briefly summarize some points that came out of the three presentations in 1 minute. So we have seen a common, let's say, some common features. One of them is that RPL, VAE are conceived as processes. So that includes always information, guidance, counseling. They include some steps related with the application and of various candidates to different possibilities or to different types of qualifications. Then, of course, various steps in certain cases somehow different, but various steps towards then assessment and finally certification. So we see that in all cases we have these common features starting from information, informing the public, and this is all, of course, related with the fact that RPL is learner or candidate centered. So this element of information, guidance, follow up is quite fundamental to ensure efficiency and effectiveness of these policies and instruments. We also saw some attention given to quality assurance of recognition of prior learning. An important element of this quality assurance is, for example, the fact that recognition of prior learning, validation, are connected obviously with learning outcomes. So to the learning outcomes approach, and then we have different tools, let's say different approaches. And we had a very good conversation with the Cameroon team about Referential métier compétences, so always linked with the APC, approche par compétence. So that's a fundamental, let's say, building block. Learning outcomes, approach par the competence-based approach, or Referential métier compétences. We also saw in the three cases a linkage being done with the National Qualifications Framework, or more specifically also with the Register of National Qualifications. In the case of France, RNCP, very clearly mentioned. Also in the case of Cameroon, there is also this intention to, of course, connect RPL with the future National Qualifications Framework. Then finally, just a word to say that there is, for example, in the case of France, as already mentioned, this important development related with simplification, some simplification of the processes of VAE, shorter periods between the various steps from information guidance to the actual assessment step. So and quite interesting also, we just heard about REVA and the single digital platform supporting VAE. So this is also a very interesting development, a one-stop shop, maybe, if we can call like that, of digitalization and digital access and outreach, a common platform, a common point for users and practitioners on VAE. And maybe here I would like just to ask a question directed specifically to Linda. Whether est-ce que REVA, la plateforme unique,
is the REVA platform
uniquement attachée au secteur
going to be attached to the sector?
à d'autres métiers. Oui.
Someone left the microphone open. Yeah, the experiment started a few months ago. It was more about the social and health sectors. Now the work that's done in the platform is first a technical work that's going to be done, and there will be a testing for future actions. First, there is a lot of technical work to do within the platform. Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
I think this is a very interesting development, and I'm sure that ACQF and all countries interested in VAE in Africa will be very interested, privileged to know more about further developments of this unique digital platform that is now being developed in France regarding VAE. So let us know when you have more news to share with us, Linda.
Oui, pour le moment, c'est vrai que tout ça est mis en test.
Yeah, for now, it's just tested. All the certifiers are still
En fait, et
doing applications on their own system. So now the platform is created to have all the applications to go through there for all the certifiers. So this is also, it requires an assessment work and testing that will be done over the year.
Linda. So colleagues,
thank you, Linda.
Start looking at our chat box. And if you have any questions, or if you want to also raise your hand to ask directly, please do it. I'd like just to address immediately the question raised by Hilda. Hilda represents Seychelles Qualifications Authority, and she has some time constraints, so she cannot stay until the end. So her question is, so RPL is very useful for allowing both academic and work progression. But my concern is that in some countries, we limit the process to an educational and training institution as main provider or center. So is there a possibility of allowing the workplace or industry to recognize and assess the experiences of candidates? So this is a question addressed to the three speakers, the three experiences, and of course, any other participant in the room today who would like also to contribute. Please, you can immediately write your points in the chat box or raise your hand. So, voilà, Mathias déjà qui voudrait parler. Mathias, tu as bien compris la question. Donc, il s'agit de savoir si...
You've understood the question, Matthias. So, do the employers and companies can participate in this RPL process?
Mozambique would like to contribute. Thank you.
J'ai compris très bien la question de Hilda.
Yeah, I've understood the question by Hilda. That's a concern. It all depends on how the legal mechanism, because if you look at our country in the Ministry of Labor and Professional Training, this is extended to the companies. So the minister, when he made the decision, clarified that the centers have to be habilitated. So he didn't say training centers, but he said it was a center of organization of RPL sessions. So a company that wishes to host an RPL session, they have to meet the requirements. For instance, the condition on the decision, they would say the locals have to be part of the settings, and also the equipment has to be according to the referential and benchmark. Now also for all specialties, they must have all the benchmark so that the assessors would use. For instance, for RPL, we have to make sure that the position is aligned to what is given in the referential. In a country like Cameroon, this is a concern that we have.
ne soit pas fermé dans les structures de formation professionnelle ou dans les instituts de formation professionnelle, qu'ils soient publics ou privés. Voilà la contribution que je pouvais apporter à Hilda sur sa préoccupation. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Matthias. Hilda, I hope this is a good clarification. So this is in practice in one of the countries presenting today. And yes, Hilda.
Thank you, Eduarda, and thank you, Matthias. It's very interesting, actually. Yes, I appreciate the answer. And I believe we will be thinking in that line as well, so as not to limit or create barriers for those who are not able, or for some reason they don't have the ability to go to an institution. So we want to open access to the workplace and even go to the extent of certifying. We are thinking about that as well, allowing the industry, the workplace, to certify candidates, because so far we are not doing it, and we are finding it's becoming a bit of a problem. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you, Hilda. And I think there are more contributions. Ida, quer falar, Ida?
Eu vou falar em português, então agradeço que façam.
I'll speak in Portuguese, so if you don't mind, please set the device. Good morning or good afternoon. Though in Mozambique will share its experience in the forthcoming meetings, I still think that it is important to address the question that was raised, in the sense that in the RPL system that is still focused on TVET, it is established that recognition of prior learning should be done by TVET institutions as well as companies. So there will be recognition of prior learning, and certificates will be issued by the regulatory authority, but they can be issued by TVET institutions or even companies, or even TVET institutions together with companies. Thank you.
So Ida Alvarinho represents the National Authority of Vocational Education and Training of Mozambique. She's director of the Qualifications Department. She's going to present the case of Mozambique at the next webinar on the 24th. So please, everybody, join. I'd like just to say that this was also an interesting solution. So not only vocational training centers, for example, or companies, but also consortia between companies and training centers can be providers of validation or recognition and prior learning services, provided they are, of course, certified. Thank you. And James and Deodon. James Mwewa from Zambia, please, and then Deodon, Cameroon.
Thank you so much, Eduarda. I want to concur with first of all, with the previous speakers, that indeed RPL should be a process that should be seen to be inclusive, and that should provide everyone an opportunity to be able to get a certified qualification. And what I think should be a point of consideration or analysis should be what role then should the various stakeholders play in the process. When we are talking of companies, employers, what should be their role. We do understand that RPL should be a process that should also be governed by quality assurance principles. And therefore, we do not want to create a situation where everyone will be free to do as they see fit, but rather they should be able to do things in a defined context. And therefore, if it means certifying, or should I say, if it means companies, for instance, certifying their own employees, then we will be there to oversee that certification process to ensure that indeed the companies, what the companies are certifying is fit, for instance, to be recognized as a national qualification. So I think those are some of the critical questions that we need to provide answers to. Thank you, Eduardo.
Thanks a lot, James, for mentioning and underscoring the importance of quality assurance, transparency, and credibility in a way of, and trust, because everything is about trust. Thank you. And Diodon, Cameroon also, Ministère Ministry of Secondary Education.
Oui, merci. Je voulais juste dire que
I just wanted to say that every company in this process has a word to say, because in the higher education ministry, when we talk about skills validation, there's something where they say that scholars can go to companies and work, and then when the scholars they are scored in these companies, these learners should have at least a certain percentage, so that these learners can be either used in the same company or in development communities. This is what we do at the level of secondary school education. And what Prof. Wamba said, and Matthias, there are referentials that are there in different domains to validate the prior learning. So as it was said, this is expanded to other ministries, not only in education. So these different ministries, they also need skills. They even have training schools. So, and those certificates need to be validated. Thank you so much, Diodon. Matthias. I just want to complete what Diodon said, that the system technical and vocational training in our countries, apart from these three ministries, industry, higher education, so normally there should be at least 14 ministries. These ministries that are developing professional training, just to add on what Diodon said, that in these ministries, the training should be done. His line is not the best.
La loi a donné un rôle fondamental.
The law has given a fundamental law to the Ministry of Higher Education to coordinate this activity. So that is what is happening in our country. And I also want to complete what I said, that in the industry of RPL industry, we should say that many companies have professional training centers. And in these professional training centers, the employees of these companies, they have qualifications that are known internally. Now, for these qualifications that are recognized internally, if they need to be recognized nationwide, there's a work that needs to be done to make sure that the work that has been done is the equivalent of the title, this certain title that is recognized in terms of qualification in the country. Because all the companies that have training centers, they qualify their employees. In our country, many companies in the petrol industry, they have their training centers, but their qualifications are not always acknowledged nationwide in terms of official certificate or diplomas. So that's why it's important to bring the RPL everywhere. That's what I wanted to bring as my contribution. Thank you so much, Matthias, for these precisions.
Que vous avez bien souligné l'importance de tous les
the fact that you mentioned that all the different stakeholders
coordination
should know the importance of coordination, which is given to the Ministry of Higher Education. And it's important to put all the stakeholders together. I think it's the same experience that is being done in Morocco. There was a Morocco representative here.
In the chat box. And Stanley, would you like to add a reflection or comment on this question? Or is this another different question, Stanley? Please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Eduarda, and thank you for the previous presenters. I've really enjoyed and I've learned a lot. I just wanted to emphasize one more thing on the last question, especially in terms of assessment places for RPL. One of the major challenges that may face RPL is lack of trust and confidence in the qualifications awarded through the RPL system by the labor market and the employment, the community. And therefore, we have to be very careful how we award and how we assess. And in most cases, we expect an RPL certificate to be just like any other certificate, even better, if not better than those offered through the formal education and training system. And so for purposes of integrity, quality, and relevance and integrity of the certificates we offer, we have to identify, like the Kenyan system identifies, utilizes the existing institutional arrangement in the normal education and training that emphasizes the issue of quality assurance. And quality assurance is implemented by the registered quality agents in the different sector regulators. And so industry is, because our education system and training assessment is industry driven, industry are workplaces where they are simply identified as assessment centers and accredited by the relevant qualification award institution for purposes of assessment. So for using an industry place, workplace, you can only use it as an assessment center, especially when the applicants are from the same workplace. Assessment bodies, panels can move to the specific place, workplace, and identify and assess and award from there for it being a familiar. Otherwise, you do not allow anybody else to award the qualifications. For Kenya, you must be accredited. Either you are established by an act of parliament or you under a legal notice for you to award, to develop and award any qualification. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this excellent clarification, Stanley. We will pass you the floor in 3 minutes, let's say, for your discussant points. Okay, Stanley.
Thank you. I'm ready. When please let me know when you need me.
Okay, we always need you, Stanley. I just
Right,
want to
thank
then,
Okay.
there are still one or two, there is one important question that I'd like then to still ask Linda, please to reply in French. And the question, she already gave some contribution in written in the chat box. So the question comes from James Mwewa Zakwa. So it is, how does the French RPL system, VAE, account for high-level skills sets and competencies that may not necessarily be acquired or acquirable through informal and non-formal learning modes, such as undertaking research, creation of new knowledge, and technical report writing? So that concerns, of course, VAE RPL in the higher education, for higher education qualifications. So Linda, could you clarify a little bit how is this question addressed? So what are the specificities maybe of VAE in the context of higher education qualifications in France? Merci.
Alors, dans l'enseignement supérieur, c'est bien sûr...
in higher education, it's the ministry which is managing. It is the certifier. So in higher education, validation of a higher education allows to justify skills that are required to obtain a higher education degree or certificate. So it's during commissions as just like RPL. So when you are evaluated, you'll be given a diploma. So with the difference is that the elements that are taken into account do not validate the experience of the candidate, but it's the higher learning. I don't know if it's clear. So
dispositif
another thing.
En fait, qui permet toujours d'apprécier ses connaissances et méthodes.
Which allows to appreciate the knowledge. So your file is sent to a teaching committee, and this and they are going to look at your file and see if the candidate meets the requirements. So it's the Ministry of Higher Education, which is a certifier.
Excuse me. If I could add something to what Linda said, is that we also have a description of the diplomas in France, which are registered in the RNCP, and you can look at them. And the Ministry of Higher Education, which is responsible, as Linda said, take into account some horizontal skills. And so maybe not the debate on transversal skills and so on, but if you look at the description by the Ministry of Education of, for instance, a master degree, you will see that some horizontal skills are taken into account.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Brigitte. So let us then continue. I think these were already good contributions to the question of VAE RPL in respect or in regard to higher education qualifications. And naturally, we will have another webinar in which these questions will certainly again be addressed. So many thanks, colleagues from France, for the contribution and for this additional clarification. Then we are going now gradually towards the end of our workshop, and we still of our webinar, and we still have two small important things. Small is important. So first of all, discussant reflections. So we already know Stanley Mahindi from Kenya National Qualifications Authority. Stanley, would you like then to share with us your views? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eduardo, and the members of this forum. I think from my side, we feel honored and humbled by this invitation to participate and learn. I say I am here more to learn than even share what we have. My name is Mahindi Stanley from the Kenya National Qualifications Authority, KNQA, a body which is mandated by law to coordinate education and training in Kenya. And it is normally referred to as the custodian of all national qualifications, and more so in the context of recognition of prior learning. It is mandated to put in place systems for recognition and attainment of national qualifications. KNQA is fairly a very young institution, enacted in 2014, but operationalized 2 years ago. And from what I've been listening, our system is modeled alongside, similar to the Zambian, and we have also borrowed heavily from the French system. And one of the reasons why the authority was created is because our education and training system had been fragmented. And this fragmented led to varieties, the challenges to issues of quality and relevance. The quality of qualifications we were producing could not meet a national standard and therefore be of international comparability. So one of the challenges that have affected the Kenyan education and training is the issue of mismatch between skills that are being produced and the labor market demands. And therefore, we have had a shortage. There is, I could call it a paradox, that while we, in terms of documentation as a country, we seem to have a shortage of relevant skilled workforce to drive our economy. On the other hand, we have plenty of skilled workforce, especially in the informal sector, who acquired competences outside the formal training system. And these people are good. They are specialists in their respective trade areas. They are not known. They are not documented. Yet, they are the ones driving our economy. Our economy is predominantly private sector driven. And so, to address this challenge, we came up with a system with that RPL could be the key to unlocking this challenge of lack of skilled workforce, and yet at the same time, recognizing, identifying and recognizing these skills. We call them their skills and competences that are invisible. So RPL is a system that has been identified to make these invisible skills, which are in our country, and they are working to make them visible, certify them, and give them credentials that will enable them be mainstreamed into the formal systems, economic systems, and education and training system. So RPL that was mooted in this country specifically to identify and assess that island of skilled workforce that are there. And secondly, it is also modeled to address the challenge of migrants and refugees. You realize Kenya is home to hundreds of thousands. By the way, there are more than 500,000 refugees and migrants in Kenya. And these people have skills. They may have run away from their countries without qualifications, yet they have skills. So RPL targets to certify these people and allow them, mainstream them into the economic lifestyle of this country. So when you look at the history of RPL in Kenya, we have had our form of recognition of prior learning dating back to the 1960s through what we call the National Industrial Training system, where we used to issue what we call government trade tests. And these government tests were at level 3 and level 4 that have been issued for a long time. However, we could not have a formal system, a formal national framework that was able to administer and control this. So 2 years ago, we commenced the process of developing a national framework for recognition of prior learning. So we have been working through sector-wide multi-sectorial committees drawn from the relevant experts, right from the qualification award institutions, policymakers, regulators, and we've even had a benchmark from foreign experts that have been implementing. So we have had a lot from the French, the Canadian systems. We have benchmarked a lot from the South African model of RPL, I think one of the oldest in Africa. So as we speak, we are at the tail end of developing a framework for recognition of prior learning that has been well developed. We have already developed the guidelines for the implementation of that framework. We have also developed national standards for assessment and certification of recognition of prior learning. And we have also put in place the relevant tools or instruments that will be used to execute recognition of prior learning. Because what we have focused on is to ensure that we put in place the relevant systems, relevant structures that will ensure the recognition of prior learning we offer in Kenya meets national standards and is of international comparability. RPL in Kenya focuses on access to opportunities for those people who had been marginalized and disadvantaged in a way, yet they were able to get a qualification. So RPL is a pathway. We are just providing an optional pathway for such people to access, to come out of informality and enter formality and attain lifelong learning. And for those who want, for the sake of self-esteem, for mobility of labor across Kenya and other regions, can have that opportunity. Now, those who want to use it to enter into formal advanced learning, they would use the RPL. And RPL in Kenya targets entirely everybody. It is targeting anybody who thinks has a competence. You have a skill or a competence, but you lack the corresponding qualification. You are within the RPL scope. And whether you are in school, youth out of school, you are a retiree, you are a refugee, you are a migrant, you are a professional in your respective trade area, and you have a competency, you are open to recognition of prior learning. So RPL in Kenya, we say, is for what? It is for certification. Either this certification could be full or part qualification. RPL is for advanced learning. It is for mobility. It is for self-esteem. And then secondly, recognition of prior learning, to make it, to internationalize it, is anchored in the national qualification framework, where it is issued by established. We have leveraged on the existing institutional arrangement to implement recognition of prior learning, where the Ministry of Education is charged with the responsibility of policy. Then the Kenya National Qualification Authority, the institution that developed and implements the framework, is the lead implementing agency in terms of implementation of recognition of prior learning. So it sets policy standards for the implementation of RPL. Then we have examination bodies accredited, which we call qualification award institutions. These institutions could be local and foreign. Then we have sector regulators. Our education system is a four pathway, where we have the basic education pathway, we have the university sector pathway, we have the TVET pathway, and then we have a unique pathway called the skills pathway that are all governed, regulated by different regulators. These are the institutions that are expected to implement recognition of prior learning in Kenya. So as we speak, we have put in place the relevant machinery, relevant tools, and we've been focusing on capacity building, awareness creation, and publicity campaigns to to the relevant stakeholders. These are the applicants, these are the employment bodies, the policy makers, to understand what RPL is and also to understand the opportunities that exist there. So we are in the process of just having a national rollout, having carried out a pilot where we've assessed, we have piloted in 3 specific trade areas, and it has been very successful. So as we speak, we have formally had the first certificates, qualifications issued through the RPL process. And the process for RPL basically in Kenya is the identification and certification, is the process of identifying, assessing, and certifying what somebody holds. This assessment and certification is done against prescribed standards. These standards are the learning outcomes, the level descriptors in the national qualification framework, so that whoever comes out of it is a qualification that meets national and international standards. So we look forward to having RPL formally rolled out in this country and implemented. Another thing we have concentrated on is building capacity of the RPL practitioners, the personnel that are going to execute RPL in this country. We commenced by training trainers of trainers. We will now train the relevant practitioners, from coordinators, from assessors, from facilitators, to enable them implement RPL. Another key area we have focused on is the issue of quality assurance, because quality assurance assessment and quality assurance are the heart of recognition of prior learning. And without strong quality assurance and assessment processes, then the process will not be of integrity. And then finally, another critical issue we are focused on is having a sustainable financing mechanism for recognition of prior learning. Being new, it is not yet funded by government. Therefore, we are working on modalities of how we can establish a sustainable financing mechanism. We realize RPL is for the disadvantaged, the less fortunate, who may not afford the cost of assessment. So we have to come up with a system. At the same time, we've also put in place a digital platforms for assessment and certification of recognition of RPL, or under the RPL MIS that is supported by ILO. This is a system that shall be able to assess and award qualification through the recognition of prior learning in this country. So in brief, Eduardo and members who are here, that is an overview. It's a bird's eye view of the Kenyan recognition of prior learning. This system we put in place has been heavily benchmarked by many other well-established and old systems. The French, we have worked with experts from the French, ILO experts who have developed other RPL systems in the world have guided us immensely, the Canadian system. And we have also learned, I learned from our African colleagues through the Continental Qualification Verification Network, where we also exchange a lot in terms of issues of qualifications and in recognition of prior learning. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Your mic is off, Eduarda. Your microphone is off, Eduarda. Eduarda, your microphone, Eduarda, please.
You are muted,
yes.
Eduarda.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. So colleagues, we are now, thank you very much again, Stanley, for the overview, very quickly done and rich about the construction of the RPL system in Kenya, and the involvement of many different stakeholders, the governance, also the very strong attention you are giving to quality assurance and integrity, and now also sustainable financing going forward in streaming the system. Thanks very much for this. Now, colleagues, we move to the last exercise. It will be very quick, and as always, we would like to have your views through a Mentimeter exercise. So my colleague Alina is now pasting in the chat box the link to our Mentimeter today, and she will start sharing the screen immediately. As always, colleagues, you just click the link that you have now in the chat box, and you have a number of questions. We have a number of questions for you. Thank you very much for your contributions. So the first question, it's an open question. What is it that you liked most today in these three presented cases, Zambia, Cameroon, and France? Just in a few words, your views. What is it that you really appreciated? What is it that impressed you most from each one of these cases? Who would like to start sharing views? Okay.
Thank you.
Any additional contributions? Okay. Interesting. Okay. Many interesting points are being shared. Thanks a lot. Okay, so there are some comments here, so highlighting and praising, for example, the understanding of the development of legal frameworks in some of the cases, the simplification processes that are now being experimented and tested, importance of RPL to enhance economic systems. Then the procedures, so the procedures of RPL processes were very clearly presented. Any additional point? Also, the fact that RPL is becoming a vast approach that encompasses all levels of education and training or qualifications. Also, a point made here about credit transfer. So this was the example given by Zambia. There is a linkage, there is an articulation Zambia does in certain cases between RPL and credit transfer. Thank you. Accumulation and transfer. Thank you. So quality in assessment and quality in certification. And these are, in fact, so these are different stages, and quality must be there for credibility, for trust, for confidence. Thank you. So we have already 15 colleagues, participants, 16. There are similarities. That's also an important constatation. Okay, need to be as close as possible to the needs of individuals and companies. A good point made also about linking RPL to qualifications framework, creating clear pathways through credit accumulation and transfer. So thank you very much for the points you made. So about expressing what is it that you liked most in these three presentations, these three cases shared here today. Thanks. Interesting points, good presentation in the case of Zambia, France, Cameroon. Thank you. Thank you very much for all these concrete comments. Maybe Alina, we could already move to the second question. Now, the second question is a multiple choice question. And it is a way to, in a way, assess the knowledge you acquired today through this presentation. So the question is very simple. What are the assessment methods that are applied in RPL in Zambia? And so you can tick all that applies from the various possibilities. So let us see if our friend, our colleague Fidelis has impressed everybody with this presentation and whether everybody can now clearly identify the assessment methods that are applied in RPL in Zambia. Yeah. As always, these polls are very interesting because they really show what people see and appreciate and grasp, and it's very interesting. We can see very clearly that participants consider that demonstration of skills is one of those methods, but also verification of portfolio of evidence and combination of different assessment methods. Validation of previous certificates is also there. Interviews. And then there is one option there, all of the above. So we have already 4 participants taking that option, all of the above. So all the different A to F methods, assessment methods. We have now 11 participants who have submitted their responses, their choices. We still have 2-3 questions. So maybe, Alina, we could move already to the next question. And it's again about Zambia. So which sectors are using RPL concretely in Zambia? So tick all that apply. So from the presentation, we learned that RPL processes are being supported and have demand in a number of sectors. Somebody mentioned earlier that there is a link with economic development and economic needs. And Fidelis had very well presented exactly this point in his presentation. I think, Fidelis, you have done a good presentation. Everybody is ticking the right, the right options. Agriculture, tourism, mining, construction. There are 2 additional options there, but they are not, the right ones. So 11 participants have voted. Thank you. Alina, let us wait just 3 seconds because I see more people are coming, are adding their voices, their votes. Okay. So Alina, maybe we could then move to the next. Now it is about Cameroon, and it's a little bit a question related with the governance setting of this undertaking. So the RPL development, so developing the RPL system in Cameroon? Which institutions are leading the development? So you can tick all that applies. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this gives us a very good view of your understanding of the roles, let's say, in terms of leadership of this process of development of RPL in Cameroon, with the MINEFOP, MINESUP, and Ministry of Secondary Education clearly considered as leading, as having a leading role. Okay. Thank you, Alina. Let's go then to the last question. Thank you. What solutions are being introduced to increase uptake and of RPL by the population? So to expand, to mainstream, to make it more accessible. And here you have a number of possibilities also for your consideration. From the 3 presentations today, what is this that is being done by the countries to increase expansion of RPL? Thank you very much for this contribution. We are going now to close our meeting. And in just 1 minute, and thank you for allocating this additional almost 20 minutes. So there was a lot of discussion today, many contributions, many questions, and also this final poll is interesting. It allows us to put together some of the key ideas discussed today. Thank you. So Alina, I think we will then conclude. So before we conclude, I would like first of all to ask everybody, if possible, if you don't mind, to open the cameras. And I have just a very brief announcement. So thank you very much. I think this was a very dynamic session today, very enriching in terms of new knowledge. Thank you so much, Fidelis, Professor Rodolphine Wamba, and Linda from France Compétences for the presentations. And thanks also to the teams of the respective countries. Matthias Diodon, in the case of Cameroon, is very, very active for the additional information you shared. On the 24th of March, we have our 3rd webinar of this series related with RPL, VAE, and we will have the following countries. It will be a very intensive webinar. South Africa, Senegal, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Portugal. So again, five, in this case, we will have 5 countries, so we will have to have a bit shorter presentations, but I think it will be really very, very enriching. If any country would like to share information on your own RPL system, please just send us a message or just write also in the chat box. In that case, we will need to organize an additional webinar because there is a lot of demand and interest. Well, we can do a picture, as we always do, of our participants today with a smile, everybody. It's such a pleasure to see you all. And allow me a very, very last word, and it's a word from my heart. I'd like to kindly ask you all, as citizens of the world, to join your best thoughts and prayers for the people of Ukraine fighting now for freedom against a brutal invasion. Please, all your prayers and best thoughts for peace in Ukraine. I want to ask you all of you. Thank you. And so we meet again, colleagues, on the 24th of March, and many, many thanks. Peace and freedom everywhere. Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, everybody. Muito obrigada.
Thank you.
Enchantée.
Obrigada, Eduarda.
And thank you to the interpreters. Thank you to all interpreters, as always. Merci.
Obrigada, Eduarda.
Thank you so much.
Merci, merci.
Eduarda.
Thank you so much, Fidelis. It was so good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck to Zambia. Thank you, Gertrude, for being here with us.
You're welcome.
Obrigada, Eduarda.
Muito obrigada, colegas.
Thank you, Eduarda. Thank you very much from the
Thank you,
interpreters.
Timothy, for being always with us, with the interpretation team. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Alina and Ana. Felizmino, muito obrigada por estar aqui. Temos que nos encontrar em breve.
Felizmino, thank you for being here. We have to meet soon.
Merci, Rodolphine. Hi, Jane. Jane, unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Wonderful presentation. Jane
Thank
from
you.
Kenya, the Human Resource Management Professionals Examinations Board.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, Jane.
For the human resource professionals in Kenya.
Thanks a lot. I hope to see you again. For
Yes,
the
I've
next webinar.
been with you and I will be with you.
Thank you.
I'm working closely with Mr. Stanley Mindy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We work a lot with Kenya National Qualifications Authority.
Yes.
You are so dynamic and innovative and hardworking. Thank you.
We now want to bring the HR profession in Kenya.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Merci, Mathias. J'ai été vraiment ravie de t'écouter.
Thank you, Matthias. It was a pleasure to listen to you. Thank you.
Eduardo, so I will close.
Yes, please, you can close the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Alina. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
It's a very difficult time.